Hi, we are now presenting our CS5800 algorithms project. The topic and aim of our project is exploring the effectiveness of clustering analysis in identifying and characterizing different levels of heart disease severity in patients. By applying clustering techniques to patient data, we aim to identify different levels of cardiovascular disease severity and evaluate the effectiveness of this approach. We also investigate the advantages and disadvantages of clustering analysis and suggest ways to improve efficiency in identifying cardiovascular disease severity. To further improve the clustering process for identifying cardiovascular disease severity, we plan to explore various clustering algorithms. We will analyze the results of these algorithms and determine the most efficient algorithm for this problem by considering the efficiency of the clustering algorithms. So the different algorithms that we have analyzed with our patient data are DB-scan algorithm, K-means, Kruskal, and Gaussian mixture algorithm. Now my teammates will explain in detail about the data set and about each algorithm's workings and its results.
So for our project, we have used the Cleveland heart disease dataset, which is a widely used dataset in the field of cardiovascular disease research. It contains data of about 300 patients with 76 attributes each, including the patient age, sex, blood pressure, cholesterol level, and various other measurements related to heart health. The goal of the dataset is to predict the presence of heart disease in a patient based on these attributes. And we have performed a dimensionality reduction on the dataset and visualized the data using a scatter plot. The first and second principal components of the dataset are extracted using PCA, and the reduced dataset is plotted as a scatter plot shown here. The color of the points represents the target variable num, which indicates the likelihood of heart disease, where 0 is the minimum and 4 is the maximum. This plot can help us visualize if there are any clear patterns or trends in the data and see if there is any apparent clustering of data points based on the target variable.
DB-scan is a clustering algorithm that is used to group together similar data points based on their proximity to each other. It is a density-based algorithm that identifies clusters by finding regions of high density and separating them from regions of low density. Unlike other clustering algorithms, DB-scan can also identify noise in the data. The DB-scan algorithm starts by randomly selecting a data point and then identifying all the neighboring points within a specific radius called epsilon. These neighboring points forms a cluster within the initial data point. The algorithm then identifies new points that are within epsilon of the existing cluster and adds them to the same cluster. This process continues until no more points can be added to the cluster. The algorithm also identifies parts that are not part of any cluster and calls them as outliers or noise. These are the points that are not within epsilon of any cluster and are considered to be too far away from any group. To determine which points belong to which cluster, DB-scan, as I said, uses epsilon and minimum points. Epsilon specifies the maximum distance between 2 points for them to be considered neighbors, and the minimum point specifies minimum number of points required to form a single cluster. We have used DB-scan algorithm to cluster our data points, and you can see this below. So that we have first pre-processed our data using PCA to reduce its dimensions. DB-scan algorithm is a density-based algorithm that groups together points that are close to each other while considering low points in low-density regions as noise. The EPS and min samples parameters, as you can see here, are tuned to get the optimal number of clusters. The clusters are then plotted into a scatter plot with different colors assigned to each clusters. Lastly, we've printed the number of clusters found by the algorithm. So this is the result that we have found after pre-processing and clustering the data using DB-scan. DB-scan requires the selections of 2 key parameters, as I said. However, the choice of these parameters can be challenging, especially for high-dimensional data. DB-scan can have difficulty identifying clusters in regions where there are large differences in data densities. In such cases, the algorithm may struggle to distinguish between different clusters or may identify clusters that are not meaningful. The time complexity of DB-scan is over n squared for the naive implementation, which makes it computationally expensive for large data sets. Although there are more efficient implementations available, the algorithm can still be slower than other algorithms such as K-means. The calculated adjusted RAND index score for DB-scan is 0.04, which is lower than the other 3 algorithms that we have analyzed. DB-scan is best suited for datasets that have density-based structures, nonlinear or complex structures in large datasets, while this dataset is not one among them.
The next clustering algorithm we used is k-means. K-means is a centroid-based algorithm where we calculate the distance between each data point and a centroid to assign it to a cluster. The goal is to identify the k number of groups or clusters in the dataset. It's an iterative process of assigning each data point to groups, and the data points get clustered based on similar features. This is the pseudocode for the algorithm. I'll explain this using a smaller data set. Suppose we have this data set. We randomly initialize k number of centroids. We have multiple ways of determining k. I'll talk about the method we used in our project a little later. For this data set, suppose we have two centroids. We will calculate the distance between each centroid to the data point, to every data point in the data set. We have used Euclidean distance for this purpose. We assign the data points to the nearest centroid based on the distance. Then we recalculate the centroid of each cluster, which is basically the mean of each cluster. Once we get the new centroids, we reassign the data points to the cluster. We repeat this until no data point changes its group. We then get our final clusters. This is how it looks. As mentioned earlier, we have multiple methods of computing the k value. We have used the elbow method in our project. In the elbow method, we take the sum of distances of all data points for each value of k and plot it against the number of clusters. We pick the k value where the elbow gets created. For example, in this graph, 4. Basically, beyond the elbow point, increasing the value of k does not significantly reduce the sum of squares. In our dataset, we computed the k value as 5. We implemented this on our dimensionally reduced dataset, and this is our output scatter plot with 5 clusters. K-means is a fast and efficient algorithm, making it suitable for large data sets. It can handle high dimensional data, making it suitable for a wide range of applications, and does not require any prior knowledge or assumptions about the data. But there are a few disadvantages to this algorithm as well. It's sensitive to initial centroid selection. If the initial centroids are well selected, the algorithm may converge quickly and find a good solution. However, if the initial centroids are poorly chosen, the algorithm may converge to a suboptimal solution. K-means is also sensitive to noise in the data, which can distort the clustering results.
Gaussian mixture models is a popular algorithm for clustering data. The algorithm works by assuming that the data is generated by a mixture of several Gaussian distributions, where each distribution represents a cluster. The GMM algorithm then estimates the parameters of each distribution that best fit the data. GMMs can mitigate many deficits faced while clustering using a simple algorithm such as k-means. Let me explain some of those. GMMs can handle clusters of different shapes and sizes. K-means is a simple algorithm that assumes that all clusters are spherical and have equal sizes. In contrast, GMMs allow for clusters of different shapes and sizes, which makes them flexible for a wider range of data. The GMMs provide a probabilistic cluster assignments, while K-means assigns each data point to a specific cluster. This soft clustering approach provides more informative cluster assignments, especially when the data points lie between the boundary between the two clusters. In the GMM algorithm, first, the model parameters, which includes the Gaussian components, mean vectors, covariant matrices, and the mixing coefficients are initialized. Then the log likelihood of the data given the model parameters is computed. Now, in the E step, the posterior probabilities of each data point belonging to each Gaussian component are computed using the Bayes rule. In the M step, the model parameters are updated by maximizing the log likelihood with respect to each parameter using the posterior probabilities computed during the E step. Then the above mentioned steps are repeated until a convergence or the maximum number of iterations specified is reached. Finally, the model is evaluated and the optimal number of Gaussian components is selected based on a criteria such as the Bayesian information criteria. Uh, Actually, we performed the Gaussian mixture clustering on the dimensionally reduced data from the Cleveland heart disease dataset mentioned before, and the data is clustered into 4 different categories here, which is represented in a unique, where each is represented in a unique color here in the given scatter plot. We actually got a adjusted rand index of 0.07, and this clustering performs better than DB-scan and k-means algorithms discussed before.
Hi all, this is Bharat and I'm going to be explaining about the Kruskal's algorithm in clustering our medical data. So first let us see about Kruskal's algorithm. So Kruskal's algorithm is a popularly known algorithm in the graph theory. So it is used in constructing minimum spanning tree. And MST is a tree that connects all nodes in a graph, and it has a minimum weight. This is done by sorting the edges in the ascending order and adding them to the MST one by one until all nodes are connected. And there is also no loops that are formed. So moving on further, how do we implement this Kruskal's algorithm to cluster our medical data to find the likelihood of heart diseases? For this, we will be using two approaches. One is the connectivity clustering and another is the agglomerative clustering. So in connectivity clustering, we create a graph where each patient's data is represented as a node and each edge represents the pairwise distance between the patients. Now we use Kruskal's algorithm to find the minimum spanning tree of this graph. The MST gives us the most important connection between different medical factors, and we use these connections to group patients. And in order to cluster these patients, we use agglomerative clustering. So here we consider each patient as a separate cluster and then iteratively merge the closest ones. So using the connections in the minimum spanning tree, we determine the distances between the clusters. And this distance is the minimum distance between any 2 points between any two clusters that are connected by an edge in the minimum spanning tree. So moving on, after implementing this Kruskal's algorithm in code, we found the adjusted rand index of Kruskal's minimum spanning tree to be 0.06, which is a very decent score. And this used Euclidean distance as its distance metric. Further, we understood a limitation of using Kruskal's minimum spanning tree. So the disadvantage is, or a limitation is, uh, this algorithm considers the distance between the data points to be independent and identically distributed. So this means that this algorithm will not be suitable if there is correlation between medical factors. So in order to overcome this limitation, we used another distance called the Mahan-Nobis. So this distance takes in the consideration of covariance between different medical factors, and hence we will be able to overcome the limitation of Kruskal's algorithm. So once we use this distance metric, we got our adjusted rand index to be 0.18, so which is a very significant jump, and we were able to cluster the points much more effectively. So in addition to that, Kruskal's algorithm is also does not need the k value beforehand, unlike algorithms like k-means, so which is another advantage. And in addition to this, Kruskal's algorithm is also easily interpretable. So that's the reason we find Kruskal's algorithm to cluster our medical data much more effectively than other algorithms.
In our project, we have evaluated and contrasted the performance of Kruskal, k-means, DB-scan algorithm, and Gaussian mixture model for detecting and classifying different levels of heart disease severity in patients. The snapshots on this slide shows the consolidated results from these algorithms. Based on our analysis, we've concluded that Kruskal's MST gave us the best results for clustering medical data and predicting the likelihood of heart disease. Its unique approach to identifying the most important connections between different medical factors sets it apart, and its interpretability makes it a valuable tool for medical researchers. By using the Mahalanobis distance instead of Euclidean distance, we can further improve the accuracy of this algorithm. We've examined the strengths and weaknesses of each algorithm and have tried to enhance their performances. We firmly believe that this project can make a significant impact in its field. We plan on continuing our work on this initiative and are excited to see where this goes in the future.